Joining me now to discuss is Florida Republican Congressman Carlos Gimenez, who came to the United States in 1960 after the Cuban Revolution. We heard President Biden, Congressman, say we stand with the Cuban people, but now what? Now what is this administration, what is America, what is the United States going to do for the people of Cuba?
Well, the administration, I really don't know what the administration is going to do. What the administration needs to do, there are about three things they need to do. Number one, they need to show their support for the Cuban people and the basic human rights of protest, and ask the Cuban government to allow that, although that's probably not going to happen. Two, they cannot ease the restrictions and the sanctions that have been were imposed by the Trump administration. Three, they need to establish some kind of internet communications in Cuba, and I think there's technology to do that. Another one could be we should be financing those leaders of the dissident groups that are in Cuba right now. And so, you know, those are concrete steps that we need to do. And finally, we cannot enter into any kind of negotiations with the Cuban government at this point. That's basically throwing them a lifeline, and right now we don't need to throw them a lifeline, we need to throw them an anchor.
Well said, Congressman. As the Wall Street Journal editorial pointed out, as you raised the issue that we need to provide internet access, or at least communications ability, to the people of Cuba, that would also send a warning to Russia and China not to meddle by propping up the regime. And that way, so it's not just helping communications for the people of Cuba, but also sending a flare into the air to Russia and China. But have people, with what has gone on, Miguel Diaz-Canel, the leader there, he's firmly in control of the military and the intelligence services, have people been murdered and disappeared, given the crackdown we've seen in the last day or so?
Well, because we don't have communications with the island, they've shut that down. We have heard reports there are at least 100 of the protesters have been arrested. We have reports of at least one person, possibly 5 people, have been killed. I've seen images that are still kind of coming out of Cuba of some pretty violent assaults on protesters, and so without the communications inside, it's pretty tough for the organizers and also the Cuban people themselves to kind of say, okay, we've had enough, we got to go out. They did that on Sunday. And then, this communist regime has had 60 years of repression. They know what they have to do, how to stamp down any kind of uprising, because they know that once the people start to lose their fear of the regime's days are numbered. Now, I'm hopeful that that's the case right now, and that people haven't, gone back to their homes. I think, I hope that it's a matter of them not communicating with each other. And if we establish communications again, and the world can see what the heck is going on in Cuba, and the people know that they can go out and demonstrate, knowing that those images of the repercussions and the brutality of the Cuban regime will be aired throughout the world. And the people can go out and demonstrate again. That's what I'm hoping for. I think that the United States government needs to do everything in its power, and I know we have the technology to reestablish an internet connection that can't be broken by the Cuban government.
And what about the left windbags here in the United States who have held up Cuba and the brutal regime in the country for decades as kind of a model of, and I was talking about this with Mike Gonzalez, who also came here as a young man from Cuba. He's with the Heritage Foundation, but holding up Cuba as a model of health care, holding up Cuba as a model of ability to handle a pandemic. What have we heard from Bernie Sanders and his ilk about his previous support for the Castro regime and communism?
Look, it's part of the ideology, and his ideology. He can't admit, as an older person that he is, that he's been wrong all his life, and he's been wrong all his life. This is what he wants to bring to the United States. Look, in Cuba, they ship out their doctors and they use them as slaves. What they do is they send them out to a country and then charge the country for the use of the doctors, and then the doctors don't get the fruits of their labor. The government gets the fruits of their labor. Now they have shortages in vaccines, medicine, hospital, hospital care. This is a total failure of a system, and that's what happens in communist countries. For a little while, they can sustain themselves, it's smoke and mirrors, but eventually it all catches up. It's caught up to the Cuban government now. They can't get any credit around the world. You know why? Because they can't pay their bills. Why
Right.
can't they pay their bills? Because their economic model doesn't work. They don't have the money to pay their bills. Therefore, they can't provide for their citizens, and that's why the citizens are upset. But also, on top of that, in order to keep the citizens down, they have to use brutal methods, and they need to use fear. In Cuba, they keep you in. You can't leave. Any country that forces their citizens to stay inside, even though they want to leave, isn't a government that should exist. And we should have learned that a long time ago, and that's the difference between America and Cuba. People are trying to get in to the United States. They want our quality of life. They want what the America represents, freedom and the ability to succeed. In Cuba, you have misery. People are trying to leave there. They actually risk their lives to jump on a raft to cross the Florida Straits, where thousands of them have died over the decades to reach freedom. That's how much they love freedom. That's how much they want freedom. And this repressive regime keeps them in, bottled up, because they know if they open the doors, everybody's going to leave the country. That kind of a government shouldn't be allowed to exist on this planet.
And I just hope all the people who have supported that brutal regime and the mistreatment of Cubans for decades, I hope they're listening. I hope they're paying attention. But we hear paltry little from them. Congressman, good to see you. Carlos Gimenez, always.